Hi friends, welcome to my channel. My name is Emily and this is Grace. She's 9 months old and we're currently in the middle of a series I'm calling Baby Basics, which is basically all of the things that you feel like you should know how to do with your new baby but you don't. And I'm filming this series not because I am an expert in momming at all, but because when we brought Grace home it was the beginning of COVID and I feel like we didn't know how to do any of those things and it was really hard to try to figure them all out by ourselves. So I would love if some of our hard learned lessons could help you. So that's why we're doing this.
1, 2, 3, funk it. My darling, I love you, 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 I love you.
Today we're going to talk about one of Grace's favorite things, which is bath time. If you don't know our story, Grace spent the first month of her life in the ICN because she was born really small. So when we did bring her home, she was still only about 4.5, 5 pounds. And I remember bath time being one of the scariest things that we did in that first week of having her home. She was just so small and slippery when she was wet, and that was kind of traumatic for us. We also made a lot of rookie mistakes when we were trying to give her a bath. We didn't know where to bathe her, so we did it in our bathtub and I just climbed in afterwards, and I remember sitting there and everything was slipping around and I was crying and we were sleep deprived and it was awful. So maybe bath time is super easy for you, but for us it was kind of a steep learning curve. So I would love to go over some of the things that we have learned since that I would have loved to know when I brought my new baby home. Okay, first things first, when do you start bathing your new baby? The first thing you're gonna wanna remember is that you should not submerge your baby in water until their umbilical cord falls off. Grace's fell off in the hospital, so we were able to submerge her as soon as she came home, but when she was in the hospital, she just got sponge bath. So basically, until their umbilical cord falls off, just take a washcloth with wet water and kind of wipe them off if you feel like they need it. I remember sometime in parenting class that one of the teachers was talking about how the white goo that is covering them, I think it's called Vernix, is really good for their skin, and she actually recommended not bathing them for 1 to 2 weeks, but I would check with your pediatrician as far as what they recommend, but you do not want to submerge your baby until their umbilical cord has fallen off. So let's assume the umbilical cord is fallen off and you're ready to give your baby your first actual bath. How often do you bathe them? You don't need to bathe your baby every day. They don't get very dirty. Make sure you clean their diaper area pretty well and wipe off their face after they eat. Otherwise, every other day or a few times a week is more than enough to do a full bath time. However, I know that a lot of people do baths as part of a nighttime routine, and babies also really love bath time. It can be really fun for both you and them.
I really think that Grace likes the bath. Like, she's so chill.
So if you do like doing bath time and it works as part of your bedtime routine, go for it. Do it every night. For us, the end of the day can kind of be stressful because my husband's finishing work and we're working on dinner. So we don't do bath as part of her bedtime routine. We bathe her either in the morning or in the middle of the day. When you're giving your baby their first baths, I really recommend doing it in the sink rather than in the bathtub because that way you can stand up. It's just a little bit easier for you mentally to be standing up than trying to be in the tub with them at first. If you're gonna bathe your baby in the sink, you're gonna need some sort of sink insert because the sink is too hard. So we use this thing called the pooge. That's this folding foam thing that sat in the sink. But there's also something called the blooming baby lotus or something like that that's soft and squishy, and I know a lot of people like that. For us, we liked the pooge better. 1, because it folded flat, and 2, because the blooming lotus just looked like it would get mold and mildew. I can't speak to that, but we really liked the pooge, so that's what we used. You're also going to want some kind of soap to bathe your baby with. It doesn't have to be baby specific, but you want it to be unscented, pretty gentle, and something with a pump so that you can do it one-handed. I really liked Johnson & Johnson's, or Dove makes one. Now that she's a little bit older, we just use our normal Dove body wash and that seems to work just fine. A couple other things that you're going to want to grab, you're going to want some kind of towel and some kind of washcloth. And these things also don't have to be baby specific. In fact, I remember being super skeptical about baby towels. Like, what is so different about this towel that makes it specific for a baby? But once she was here, I realized that she did need her own towel just for hygiene reasons. It doesn't have to be a baby one. So we got these white muslin ones from Amazon that are pretty thick and soft, and it's nice for her to have her own towel. Your towel doesn't have to have a hood, however, it can be really helpful. One, because don't underestimate the power of animal ears on your new baby, and two, the hood can keep their head warm when their hair is wet. You're also going to want some kind of washcloth, and this definitely doesn't have to be a baby one. However, we use these ones that double as burp cloths. That way we get a lot of use out of them. You can tell this one's been through the washer a few times. A few other things you're going to want to grab: some unscented lotion, because baby skin can be really dry, especially if your baby's born in the winter like Grace was, and a hairbrush to kind of brush their hair afterwards. Okay, so we've gone over all of the supplies we're going to use. How do you actually give that new baby a bath? So the first thing you're going to do is to gather all of your supplies. It's nice to do this either while someone else is holding the baby or while your baby's napping, because once they're actually in the bath, you don't want to leave them alone even if it's for a minute. So you're going to want to gather all of the things that we just talked about for as far as supplies, and then you also want to make sure that the room is warm. So one note just about bathing a newborn is that newborns have a really hard time regulating their body temperature, and baths can accidentally make them really cold. A couple of tips we learned in the ICN: one, close the bathroom door and turn the shower on as hot as it can go so it gets really nice and steamy in there. Another thing you can do is to take your baby's towel and put it in the dryer while you're giving them a bath. That way you have something really warm to wrap them up in as soon as they're done in the bath. The last thing you're going to do before you put your baby in is to get the water to the perfect temperature, because you don't want to put your baby in when it's too cold, and you definitely don't want it to be too hot and burn them. The way to kind of test the temperature: one, you can get these little rubber duckies. Grace just likes to play with it, but this one actually says whether or not the water is too hot. I don't honestly do that very often. I usually just either use the inside of my wrist or my elbow, and if it feels kind of lukewarm, that's about the temperature you want. You don't want it to be too warm so that it burns them, or honestly so that it dries out their skin. So once she's in the bath, she's got her diaper off, the water's a good temperature, we're ready to go. I usually start by taking a washcloth and wiping her face off with just warm water. I don't usually use soap on her face because I found it actually irritated her skin a little bit, and I'm really worried about getting soap in her eyes. So I usually just use warm water on a washcloth to wipe her face off, and then I take that washcloth and I get it wet and I would set it on her chest to help keep her warm as I continue to bathe her. From her face, I just kind of work my way down. I do her hands. I make sure to wash those really well because new babies stick their hands in their mouth all the time. And I kind of work my way down the front and then flip her over and do the back. I recommend waiting to wash their hair until the very end because that can make them pretty chilly, and it can also be kind of the point where the bath time turns from fun into scary for a lot of babies. So if you do it last, it lets them enjoy it for as long as possible, and then you can take them out right after you wash their hair. Once your baby's all clean, you're going to want to dry your own hands off, and then you can pick them up and it'll be a little bit less slippery, and transfer them to a towel as soon as you can. This is probably the time that they're going to be the least happy, so I try to work really quickly in drying her hair off and getting the rest of her dry. And then to kind of calm her down, I'll take a little bit of lotion and I start to give her a little bit of a baby massage. And then you're also going to want to put a diaper on them as quickly as possible because we've had several poo or pee incidents as soon as we pulled her out of the bath and we had to start all over. This is also where you're going to want to take a brush and just run it over their hair really quickly. That's less for their hair and more for their scalp, and the stimulation can help them to not have quite as much cradle cap. A few baby hygiene tips that I'll throw in while we're talking about bath time. One, because a lot of babies love bath time, it can be a really great time to file or trim their nails. They're also in a perfect position, so as long as you do it really quickly, as soon as you put them in before they get their hands wet, you can take their hands and file their nails really quickly while they're distracted by the water, and it can be less tears overall. I also feel like it's a good time to mention that baby acne is totally normal. It's actually caused by your hormones still circulating through their body for a little while after birth. So because it has nothing to do with their skin in particular, using soaps or scrubbing will only aggravate it. They just need time to kind of let your hormones work their way out. If your baby has cradle cap, that's really common too. Grace had it for probably the first 3 months. One thing that I found worked was taking some coconut oil and kind of massaging it into her scalp, and I would let that sit for like 20 minutes before I put her in the bath. And then I would take this little silicone brush from Amazon and kind of scrub it a little bit. You don't want to be too aggressive though, because if you peel it back, the skin underneath is sensitive and it can get an infection. My husband and I usually did bath time as partners because it's pretty stressful. They're very small and slippery, and it can be really helpful to have someone pick them up out of the bath and someone waiting with the towel to wrap them up immediately. She was also usually screaming her head off at this point because she hated leaving the bath. So it was helpful just to have moral support in that moment. And then we just breezed through drying them off as quickly as we could. Ooh, one other thing. If your baby pees while you're bathing them, it's okay. I Googled it. Pee is actually sterile and you can just continue on as if nothing has happened. If they poop, however, that's a different story. You're probably gonna wanna scoop that up with like a paper cup and then wash everything off and start over again. Okay friends, that's all I have for you today. I hope that was helpful. Have fun bathing your baby. I know that Grace really likes it, so I hope that your baby likes it too. And enjoy. Say bye. Bye, happy bath time.
Is it for my fans on the YouTube?